Imagine you're walking through the bustling streets of ancient Rome on a crisp December day. The air is alive with the sounds of laughter, music, and the clatter of dice being tossed on cobblestones. Homes are adorned with garlands of greenery, and the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine drifts from every direction. It's a city transformed, formalities tossed aside, boundaries blurred, and joy spilling into every corner. For one glorious week, Rome's rigid social order melts away. Masters serve their slaves, gifts are exchanged with heartfelt goodwill, and the streets become a playground for revelry and togetherness. It's not just a celebration, it's a complete escape, a pause in the grind of daily life to honor an ancient god and embrace the ideals of equality, abundance, and renewal. This was Saturnalia, a festival so vibrant and beloved that echoes of it can still be felt in the way we celebrate today. But where did it come from? Why did it matter so much to the Romans? And how did its traditions help shape Christmas as we know it? Let's uncover the story behind one of history's most extraordinary celebrations. A week where the rules of life were rewritten, if only for a little while. Picture ancient Rome in late December. The fields were bare, the hard work of autumn was done, and people were ready for a break before winter truly settled in. This was the backdrop for Saturnalia, a festival dedicated to Saturn, the god of agriculture, wealth, and time. For the Romans, Saturn wasn't just a deity to be worshipped. He represented a mythical golden age when life was simple, plentiful, and free from conflict. Saturn's mythology lies at the heart of Saturnalia. Romans revered him as a benevolent god who ruled over a time of peace and abundance. This golden age, as it was called, was a mythical era where there were no wars, no social hierarchies, and no scarcity. Food grew freely from the earth, and humanity lived in harmony. By honoring Saturn, the Romans weren't just celebrating a deity, they were invoking the memory of an ideal time when life was balanced and joyful. Saturn's role in mythology links him to the Greek god Cronus, ruler of the Titans. While Cronus is often depicted as a tyrannical figure in Greek mythology, Saturn took on a far kinder persona in Roman tradition. After his overthrow by his son Jupiter, Saturn was said to have fled to Latium, where his arrival brought prosperity and harmony to the region. Romans believed that Saturn's presence blessed their land with agricultural abundance, and the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum became a central site for celebrating his gifts. The roots of Saturnalia run deep, likely predating Rome itself and tying back to earlier agricultural traditions. Some scholars see parallels between Saturnalia and the Chronia, a Greek festival honoring Cronus that similarly featured feasting and the temporary suspension of societal norms. Others point to older Mesopotamian festivals, such as the Akitu, which celebrated renewal and the cycles of life, reflecting themes that later defined Saturnalia. The choice of December 17th as the festival's starting date wasn't arbitrary. It fell near the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, when the sun seemed at its weakest. For the Romans, this wasn't a time for despair. It was a turning point. The days would soon grow longer, and the sun would regain its strength. Saturnalia became a celebration of hope, renewal, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Originally, Saturnalia was a modest one-day festival marking the end of the agricultural year. Farmers would pause their work to reflect on the harvest stored to sustain them through winter. Over time, as the festival grew in significance, it expanded into a week-long affair, ending on December 23rd. This transformation mirrored the importance of Saturn, not just as an agricultural deity, but as a symbol of prosperity and balance. Saturnalia wasn't only about mythology and ritual, it was also deeply practical. It reminded Romans of their reliance on the cycles of nature and the gods who governed them. Saturn wasn't portrayed as a distant, fearsome figure. He was approachable, embodying the ideals of fairness and abundance. Celebrating Saturn was a way of giving thanks for the harvest, while embracing the hope of better days ahead. If you think of Saturnalia as just a week of parties, you'd only be scratching the surface. Sure, it was lively, loud, and full of indulgence, but at its core, Saturnalia had a deeper purpose. It was a time for Romans to break free from the grind of daily life and celebrate something bigger: community, equality, and the idea that life didn't have to be all work and no play. One of the most fascinating aspects of Saturnalia was how it flipped the social order on its head. Rome was a society built on hierarchy: patricians over plebeians, masters over slaves, the elite over everyone else. But during Saturnalia, those boundaries blurred, even if just for a little while. Slaves were allowed freedoms they didn't have for the rest of the year. But we'll touch on that later on. It wasn't just about letting loose. It was a nod to the golden age of Saturn's reign, a time when everyone was equal and there was no need for rulers or laws. By reenacting that ideal, Saturnalia reminded people that their rigid social structures weren't set in stone. It was a moment to reflect on the possibility of a more balanced world, even if the reality outside the festival was far less kind. Generosity was another key part of Saturnalia. It wasn't about showing off wealth, it was about fostering goodwill and strengthening relationships. There was an emphasis on treating others kindly, whether they were your closest friends or those you usually overlooked. And then there was the joy. Saturnalia wasn't just a time to give, it was a time to receive, to bask in the warmth of shared meals, laughter, and the simple pleasures of life. For many Romans, this was their favorite time of year, a break from the usual grind that felt like a breath of fresh air. Ultimately, Saturnalia's spirit wasn't just about fun and games. It was a reminder that life could be different, that for 1 week, everyone could set aside their differences and come together. It's no wonder that these ideas, equality, generosity, and joy, still resonate in our celebrations today. If you were lucky enough to wander into ancient Rome during Saturnalia, you'd feel the energy before you even saw it. The streets would be alive with laughter, music, and the clatter of dice games. Bright garlands of greenery and candles decorated doorways and public spaces, and the usual hustle and bustle of Roman life would be replaced with something far more relaxed and far more chaotic. Saturnalia was, first and foremost, a festival of joy and indulgence. Saturnalia wasn't just celebrated in the privacy of homes, it spilled into the streets, forums, and temples, turning the entire city into a festival ground. Public spaces became the heart of the celebrations, where Romans from all walks of life gathered to honor Saturn, share in the revelry, and embrace the communal spirit of the season. The Temple of Saturn, located in the Roman Forum, was the focal point of the festivities. The celebration officially began with a grand public sacrifice to Saturn, where priests and civic leaders offered gifts and animals in his honor. This ritual wasn't just a formality, it was a communal act, bringing people together to give thanks for the year's harvest and seek Saturn's blessings for the year ahead. After the sacrifice, the participants would untie the woolen bonds that normally adorned the statue of Saturn, symbolizing freedom and the festival's themes of liberation. Markets and forums transformed during Saturnalia, buzzing with activity and adorned with greenery and festive decorations. Vendors sold small gifts, candles, figurines, and other tokens that Romans exchanged with friends and family. These gifts weren't about material wealth but about thoughtfulness, reinforcing the festival's focus on connection and goodwill. Civic leaders often hosted large meals in open areas, inviting citizens to partake in the bounty. These feasts emphasized equality, as anyone, regardless of their social status, could join in and share the food. Games and performances were common in public spaces during Saturnalia. Musicians, actors, and dancers entertained the crowds, while gambling, typically frowned upon in Roman society, became a festive pastime. Dice games were especially popular, with participants playing in the streets or at markets, adding to the lively atmosphere. The streets themselves became stages for celebration. People dressed in colorful clothing, often abandoning their traditional togas for more relaxed and festive attire. Singing, dancing, and laughter filled the air, creating an environment of joy and chaos that was unique to Saturnalia. It was a time when the usual rules didn't apply, where freedom and fun took precedence over order and routine. Even the simplest acts took on a special meaning during Saturnalia. Lighting candles in public spaces symbolized the return of the sun and the renewal of life after the solstice. Decorating with greenery, such as holly and ivy, was a nod to the persistence of life even in the heart of winter. In public spaces, Saturnalia transcended the boundaries of class and home, becoming a festival for the entire city. It was a time when strangers could share a laugh, a meal, or a drink, united by the spirit of the season. These shared celebrations in the streets and forums were a testament to the communal heart of Saturnalia, ensuring that no one, rich or poor, was left out of the joy. One of the most striking and unique aspects of Saturnalia was how it temporarily upended the rigid social hierarchy of Roman society. In a culture where the divide between masters and slaves was absolute, Saturnalia offered a rare symbolic moment of equality. During this festival, slaves were given freedoms that would have been unimaginable at any other time of the year. Slaves were allowed to participate in the festivities alongside their masters. In many households, roles were reversed for the duration of Saturnalia. Masters would serve their slaves at meals, a gesture meant to echo the egalitarian ideals of the Golden Age when Saturn ruled. Slaves could wear the pileus, a felt cap that symbolized freedom, further emphasizing their temporary liberation during the festival. But Saturnalia wasn't just about letting slaves join in the fun, it was also about giving them a voice. The light-hearted chaos of the festival allowed slaves to joke with, tease, and even mock their masters without fear of punishment. They could share in the food, the gambling, and the gifts, experiencing, if only briefly, a world without strict class distinctions. The election of the king of Saturnalia often added to this sense of equality. This figure, sometimes chosen from among the slaves, was given the authority to playfully boss others around, including their masters. The king of Saturnalia could issue humorous commands like telling someone to dance, sing, or deliver a joke, and everyone was expected to comply. This playful role reversal highlighted the festival's focus on freedom and the temporary breakdown of societal rules. It's important to note that this role reversal was mostly symbolic. Saturnalia didn't fundamentally change the harsh realities of slavery in Rome. For most slaves, the freedoms of Saturnalia were fleeting, a brief glimpse of what life could be if the rigid social structures were removed. However, for that short time, it provided a sense of joy, community, and recognition that was otherwise absent from their daily lives. It was a momentary pause in the grind of Roman society, a time when even the lowest rungs of the social ladder could partake in the celebration. This temporary liberation may have been fleeting, but it spoke volumes about the values Saturnalia aimed to embody. If there's one thing the Romans knew how to do, it was throwing a feast, and Saturnalia was the perfect excuse to indulge. Food and drink played a central role in the celebrations, turning every home into a banquet hall and every table into a tribute to abundance. This wasn't just about eating well, it was a way to honor Saturn and celebrate the bounty of the earth. The dishes served during Saturnalia reflected the festival's agricultural roots. Roasted meats, especially pork, were often the centerpiece of the meal, symbolizing prosperity and the fruits of the harvest. Bread and cakes made from freshly milled grains were common, and fruits like figs and pomegranates added color and sweetness to the table. These weren't just everyday staples, they were prepared and presented with care, turning the ordinary into something celebratory. Wine flowed freely during Saturnalia, and moderation was not the name of the game. Romans believed in the power of wine to loosen inhibitions and bring people together. Wine was often paired with spiced or honeyed drinks, adding a festive twist to the usual fare. One unique feature of Saturnalia feasts was the idea of shared abundance. It wasn't just about the food itself, it was about the act of coming together to enjoy it. Families, neighbors, and even slaves gathered around the same table, sharing in the same dishes. This communal feasting reinforced the festival's themes of unity and equality. The atmosphere around these meals was just as important as the food itself. Saturnalia was about letting go of formalities, so the feasts were lively, loud, and filled with laughter. People toasted to good fortune, sang songs, and played games at the table, making the meals as much about entertainment as nourishment. While the feasting was indulgent, it was also symbolic. Each dish, drink, and shared toast was a way of giving thanks to Saturn for the harvest and expressing hope for the year ahead. The food and drink of Saturnalia weren't just fuel for the party. They were the heart of it. They represented the hard work of the year past and the promise of brighter days to come. A reminder that even in the darkest days of winter, there was always something to celebrate. Gift-giving was one of the most cherished traditions of Saturnalia. Unlike today's elaborate and often expensive Christmas gifts, the presents exchanged during Saturnalia were typically simple and symbolic, focused more on meaning than material value. One of the most popular gifts were candles. These weren't just practical items. They carried deep symbolic significance. The candles represented light returning to the world after the darkness of the winter solstice, mirroring the growing strength of the sun as the days became longer. Exchanging candles was a way of sharing hope and warmth, a gesture that resonated with everyone during the cold months. Another common gift was small figurines, often made of clay or wood. These figurines, sometimes humorous or playful in design, were called sigillaria. They could represent anything from deities to animals, and they carried a lightheartedness that matched the festival's joyful atmosphere. These tokens were less about practicality and more about the thought behind them, a way of saying, "I was thinking of you." Food was also a popular gift during Saturnalia. Nuts, fruits, and small cakes were wrapped and given to friends and family, symbolizing abundance and the gratitude for the harvest. These edible gifts reinforced the communal and agricultural roots of the festival. What made Saturnalia gift-giving unique was its universal appeal. Gifts weren't reserved for close family members or significant others. They were exchanged between friends, neighbors, and even strangers. The act of giving was less about obligation and more about fostering goodwill and strengthening bonds within the community. Over time, this tradition of giving small, meaningful gifts during Saturnalia evolved and left a lasting legacy. As Christianity began to take hold in the Roman Empire, it was inevitable that old pagan traditions and new Christian observances would intersect. Saturnalia played a significant role in shaping the early celebrations of Christmas, but it wasn't the only influence. The festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, also contributed to the eventual establishment of Christmas as we know it. The transition wasn't immediate, but over time elements of both Saturnalia and Sol Invictus were adapted, reimagined, and seamlessly integrated into the Christian holiday. The connection began with timing. Saturnalia took place in mid to late December, from December 17th to 23rd, and culminated in festivities that coincided with the winter solstice, the year's darkest days, after which the sun's strength began to return. Similarly, the festival of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, celebrated on December 25th, was established by Emperor Aurelian in 274 CE to honor the rebirth of the sun. When Christianity sought to establish a date for the birth of Jesus, December 25th provided a meaningful choice. While the Bible doesn't specify when Jesus was born, aligning Christmas with existing pagan festivities helped ease the transition for converts already accustomed to celebrating during this time of year. By placing the celebration of Jesus' birth alongside festivals like Saturnalia and Sol Invictus, the Church redefined the season, positioning Christ as the true light of the world. One of the most apparent carryovers from Saturnalia to Christmas was the spirit of generosity and gift-giving. During Saturnalia, people exchanged small, thoughtful gifts, candles, food, and figurines, to foster goodwill and celebrate abundance. This tradition evolved into the Christmas custom of giving presents, initially symbolized through the story of the Magi bringing gifts to the Christ child, and later as a broader expression of love and community. The festive atmosphere of Saturnalia also influenced Christmas. While Christmas didn't adopt Saturnalia's rowdier elements, the emphasis on joy, togetherness, and celebration found a natural home in the Christian holiday. Saturnalia's focus on community and unity was mirrored in Christmas, where the holiday became a time to gather with family, share meals, and embrace the spirit of peace and goodwill. The festival of Sol Invictus brought a different yet complementary layer of symbolism. Honoring the sun's return after the winter solstice, Sol Invictus celebrated the triumph of light over darkness. Early Christians found this imagery deeply resonant, connecting it with their belief in Jesus as the light of the world. By associating Christmas with themes of renewal and hope already present in Sol Invictus, the Church reinforced the spiritual significance of the season. While Saturnalia focused on agricultural abundance and communal joy, Sol Invictus emphasized the cosmic order and divine power of the sun. Together, these festivals helped shape the multifaceted identity of Christmas, blending earthly and heavenly symbols into one unified celebration. Saturnalia's tradition of decorating homes with greenery also found its way into Christmas. Christians later adopted these decorations, giving them new meanings tied to eternal life and faith. Similarly, the candles exchanged and lit during both Saturnalia and Sol Invictus became a hallmark of Christmas, representing the light of Christ and the hope for brighter days ahead. Just as Saturnalia encouraged Romans to pause their daily routines and embrace equality, Christmas invited Christians to set aside differences and celebrate together. The communal focus of Saturnalia, its feasts, games, and shared joy, found echoes in Christmas traditions, making the holiday a time for reconnection and reflection. But like all things, its prominence eventually faded. The decline of Saturnalia wasn't sudden. It was part of a gradual transformation tied to the changing religious, cultural, and political landscape of the Roman Empire. As Christianity spread and became the dominant faith, the pagan roots of Saturnalia made it increasingly incompatible with the values of the new religious order. By the 4th century, Christianity was no longer a fringe religion. With the conversion of Emperor Constantine and the subsequent declaration of Christianity as the official religion of the empire, the Church gained unprecedented influence. Pagan festivals like Saturnalia, once integral to Roman life, began to fall out of favor. The Church worked to replace these celebrations with Christian holidays that aligned with their teachings and values. Saturnalia's association with revelry, role reversals, and indulgence clashed with the more solemn and spiritual focus of Christianity. To distance themselves from the pagan traditions, Christian leaders sought to reinterpret or replace these festivals altogether. As the Roman Empire itself began to decline, so too did its traditional festivals. The economic and political instability of the later empire left less room for grand public celebrations like Saturnalia. The festival, once a reflection of Rome's agricultural prosperity and cultural unity, lost its footing as the empire fractured and regional identities grew stronger. In the centuries that followed, Saturnalia faded from public life, its customs absorbed into Christian traditions or abandoned altogether. By the time the Middle Ages arrived, Saturnalia was little more than a memory, preserved in the writings of Roman historians and poets. So here we are at the end of our journey through the lively, chaotic, and deeply meaningful world of Saturnalia. It's incredible, isn't it, how a festival from ancient Rome, full of laughter, feasting, and even a little mischief, has echoes in the way we celebrate the holiday season today. From the joy of gathering with loved ones to the tradition of giving gifts, Saturnalia feels like a distant but familiar ancestor to Christmas. Of course, Saturnalia isn't the only influence. As I mentioned in my previous video, other traditions like the Feast of Sol Invictus and customs from cultures across Europe also left their marks on Christmas. But if you're looking for the heart of how we celebrate, the spirit of light, renewal, and coming together, Saturnalia encompasses so much of what we cherish about the season. So, next time you light a candle, share a meal, or exchange gifts during the holidays, take a moment to imagine the bustling streets of Rome, the sounds of dice games and laughter, and the warmth of a celebration that connected everyone, if only for a while. Because whether it's Saturnalia or Christmas, the joy of celebrating together is truly timeless. And before we wrap up, I've got some exciting news to share: the winners of our giveaway. A huge congratulations to Professor Shade, Annan, Tiffany, Accountability, The Augmented, Scruffy, Let Me See It, General Shoppy, Pompous Orange, and Annoy Mousen. I'll be reaching out to you directly, so keep an eye on your inbox for all the details. Thank you to everyone who participated. It truly means the world to have your support. If you didn't win this time, don't worry. I've decided to do giveaways more often. Just my way of thanking you for your continued support. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.